Good evening, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your third and final video blog of the night for Wednesday, November 5th, 2014, around 8:20 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. It was a nice day out today, highs in the 60s. Now it's cloudy out, dark out. We'll be down into the low 40s, and tomorrow it's supposed to be around 55 or so, with some rain showers getting heavier in the evening hours. Some news to report. Beginning November 26th, TNA Impact will be no longer on Spike Television. Spike has officially canceled TNA Impact, and TNA has to find a new home to show the programming in the United States. TNA is the second biggest wrestling company in the United States behind the WWE, and they had a very successful 12.5-year run as a good promotion and stuff. They did a lot of pay-per-views, and also they were a hit on Spike TV, but the past few years the ratings have been subpar for Spike TV, and they lost a lot of talent and stuff, and they haven't been promoting too much around the United States. The second half of 2014, there's rumors they'll be going on a tour of Europe sometime in the near future, but they do not have any house shows or pay-per-view scheduled in the United States anytime in the near future. And I hate to say that TNA might be going under in 2015, in my opinion. And I don't think they're going to be on a major cable network. If they get a cable deal, it's probably going to be on a small network and stuff like that. And we'll wait and see, because WWE needs competition, strong competition, and I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. It's too bad, because professional wrestling thrives on competition, and WWE hasn't had serious competition since WCW and ECW went out of business almost 14 years ago. It's been that long. I can't believe it's been that long. Well, anyway, that's all about what I'm going to say on that for right now. That's another subject for another day. And my third and final video blog subject of this night is my personality profile. Tonight's personality profile is about legendary game show host Jim Perry. Jim Perry had an over 35-year career in the world of show business. He was a singer, and he also hosted game shows in Canada and the United States. And he was such a good game show host in Canada and the United States. He was one of the most successful game show hosts of all time to host a successful show in Canada and a successful show in the United States. Actually, Jim Perry's real name was Jim Dooley, and he was born in Camden, New Jersey, and he lived in suburban Philadelphia when he was growing up, but his family moved often. His parents got a divorce at a young age. He had to go through several schools, making new friends and then leaving and stuff like that. He bounced around all over the place. He actually played basketball in high school for 3 different high schools, and he actually was pretty good at it. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania to play basketball, but Jim dropped out because he ran out of money. He couldn't support to go to college, so he became a singer for the Armed Forces Network, and he actually worked for a short time for GE, and then in the mid-50s he became a singer at Grosslands in the Catskill Mountains, and he was discovered by actor-comedian Sid Caesar. And Jim was Sid Caesar's straight man for several years. Even he spent a 3-year stint with him in Las Vegas. That's pretty amazing. And then Jim wanted to go on to television, but he had to change his name because there was actually an actor named Jim Dooley, another actor named Jim Dooley, and he couldn't use the name Jim Dooley at all because it would be confusing. So Jim legally changed his name to Jim Perry. Perry was actually Jim's mother's maiden name, and he started to host he hosted a few television pilots for NBC for game shows and talk shows in the mid-60s, but they were not sold. And actually he started his career television host in Canada, hosting game shows back in 1965. He hosted Fractured Phrases, and then he hosted I Bet, It's Your Move, and Moneymakers game shows in Canada. A couple of them, It's Your Move and Moneymakers, were actually produced in Canada, but they were syndicated in the United States for like 13 weeks, but they weren't major hits. Also, Jim was an announcer for that show starring Joan Rivers in 1969. He was a spokesperson for Molten Salt, and he appeared in a few commercials for them in the late 60s and stuff. And Jim Perry was also a weekend DJ for WABC Radio from 1969 through 1972. In the early 1970s, Jim moved his family to Canada because he was getting more and more television shows hosting in Canada. Jim hosted the game show Headline Hunters for many years on CTV from 1972 to 1982, with reruns on CTV into 1983. It was a great game show. It was about like headlines, and the contestants would have to identify that. He was the host of the Miss Canada pageant from 1967 through 1990. He had a great one for that. He hosted the Santa Claus Parade from Toronto, Canada for many years. But Jim Perry's most famous game show in Canada was Definition. He hosted Definition from 1974 through 1989 on CTV, 15 years. Definition was about a game show of puns and stuff. And it was originally like a celebrity and a contestant playing against another celebrity and contestant. It was like a Canadian version of Wheel of Fortune, but they didn't spin a wheel and stuff. And it was very successful, and but Definition was criticized as being a show that gave cheap prizes and stuff, and like they gave like pen sets and silverware as main prizes. They didn't even give away a car until later on in the series, and then they dropped the celebrities like maybe in the mid 80s and stuff like that. But Definition was very successful. There was a lot of celebrities who appeared on Definition who were from the United States that did not appear regularly on game shows in the United States, surprisingly. But Jim Perry really wanted to have a breakthrough game show hit in the United States because that's where he's from. And Jim Perry got an agent, and then he got his big break in March of 1978 when he was filming a pilot of a New Goodson Todman game show called Card Sharks for NBC. The pilot tested pretty good, and then Jim Perry hosted Card Sharks for 3.5 years on NBC. He moved his family back from Toronto, Canada to the United States in Los Angeles, California, and the Card Sharks was a popular hit on NBC for 3.5 years. Jim appeared as a celebrity contestant on a few game shows like Password Plus and Wheel of Fortune and Family Feud and stuff like that. And he commuted from Los Angeles to Toronto every so often to tape Definition and Headline Hunters, as well as Card Sharks. In the fall of 1981, Card Sharks got canceled by NBC. Jim hosted 2 unsold game show pilots for NBC, Casino and Twisters, around the early 80s, but they did not sell. They did not make it to series on NBC, but those pilots for those shows were like pretty good. It got him an audition for the next game show hit he had in the United States, also on NBC, Sale of the Century, which was being revived as a quiz show. Sale of the Century was a game show back in the 60s and 70s on NBC, first hosted by Jack Kelly and Joe Gazziola. It was question and answers games mixed in with like shopping stuff and that. The president of NBC at the time, Brandon Tackett, thought Jim Perry would be a great host for Sale of the Century. The producers didn't think so at first, but they gave him like a pilot, and then he tested through the roof, and for the next 6.5 years, Jim was hosting Sale of the Century on NBC and still commuting to Canada, hosting Definition. But in the spring of 1989, Jim Perry was dealt a big blow. Sale of the Century was canceled by NBC, and Definition was also canceled by CTV, so he was out of a job for the first time for years, and he was in his mid-50s, and he kind of faded away from television, which was not that good, because he was still good as a game show host. And I'm surprised, like, he didn't host another game show in the United States or Canada around this time, but game shows were falling out of favor by the networks and syndication because of talk shows and stuff like that. And Jim Perry actually made a cameo on Studs, which was hosted by Mark DiCarlo, who was actually a contestant on the Sale of the Century, and Mark was the all-time winningest contestant in the history of Sale of the Century. He made a cameo in 1991. He actually hosted a couple unsold lottery game show pilots for Goodson Todman Productions in the early 90s and stuff. And he wrote 2 books on self-awareness. One I have, it's a Sleepers Awaken, and another one is there's got to be a pony in there somewhere, but that has never found a publisher. And Jim Perry was probably one of the best game show hosts of all time, and a lot of people did not know he hosted game shows in Canada who were from the United States, and Canadians didn't know that he hosted game shows from in the United States as well. So that's pretty amazing. And Jim's like retired from the game show business. He lives in Oregon now with his wife. They've been married over 50 years, and his wife's is an artist and stuff, and she owns her own pottery studio and stuff. It's pretty good. And that's about it on that. I'll be back tomorrow, Facebook friends and YouTube followers, with 3 more video blogs. One of them I'm confirming tonight will be about the top 10 greatest NFL play-by-play announcers of all time, and the 2, you gotta find out what they are, Facebook friends, if you're my Facebook friend. And don't forget, it's coming soon, the Prime 9. I'm not talking about the MLB Network. I'm talking about Prime 9 subjects of Julie Broughton, Local 6. Julie's got a nice smile, nice legs. Heidi Lee Pratt, who's got the nicest smile in the world and the nicest legs in the world. Janelle Tobin, Crystal Pistol, Dee Patel, Last Week, No Buzz, Tony Ramos, Donald Beauregard, Bruce Cronin. Want to put a wager on that, Richie? And you should own millions of dollars scratch tickets each year he plays. He doesn't win any significant big money. Good night, everybody. See you tomorrow, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. Bye now.